Today, I'm sitting with someone whose story reads like a love letter from heaven. Liz has walked through seasons that could have left her bitter, but instead of being buried by her trials, she's discovered something beautiful, that God's refining fire doesn't destroy us, but it's there to reveal the gold He's always seen on the inside of us. Today, she's going to share about her big endeavor that she's pouring into with her family. It's not just a family legacy, but it's a sanctuary where others will encounter the same overwhelming love of God that first captured her heart at just a young age of 12. And I think you're going to see kind of a full circle moment, how God deposited a seed into her heart at just a young age. And now, being much more mature and wiser and learning how to rest rather than strive, God is fulfilling this dream. Her story reminds us that our hardest chapters aren't the end of the book. They're often where the most beautiful chapters begin. Let's get into it. It's funny, like the premise behind the Hope Pandemic is that even through hard times, there's always still yet more that God has for us. And so one of the things that we talk about quite consistently, there's always something to keep living, to keep becoming more for, and to attain the full promises of God for your life. So I would love for you to open up and tell the listeners about your first encounter with God. I know it happened at a very young age. Take us back to that moment and really paint for us, because what you're doing here is you're laying this foundation for this constant conversation that God has been speaking to you since you were 12.
Yes. So I was really privileged to go to an incredible church camp when I was 12 years old up in Ruidoso, New Mexico. And so let me tell you, the environment is the perfect place to ask Jesus into your heart and experience his love because I was in the mountains and we had cabins everywhere. And the people who ran the camp, they were just such a sweet and loving family. It was a husband wife team, and they had four daughters who were all older than me, but they just oozed love. They were so kind and so loving and so warm, and you could just tell that their cup was just overflowing with the love of God. And so the whole premises of this camp was we did musicals. And so we would go out in the community and have a musical. And of course, it was always a Christian emphasis to it. And so I remember one evening, and we were praying together as a group. And there were a lot of, 12, 13, 14, 15-year olds there. And she asked, she says, who here doesn't, wants to ask Jesus into their heart? And so it was at that moment I just said yes with 100% of me. I wanted what they had. And I knew that they had the love of Jesus in their heart. And that's what I wanted. So.
Gosh, that's so powerful, because I think even in today's culture, we really can, it's easy to overlook the power of an encounter with God at a young age. And just knowing that you were at this place where you saw it demonstrated by this family is just so much of God's love letter that He was going to be writing through you guys. You said there was a moment, there was a turning point, at least in your heart. What did you mean by that? And where was a gap between your heart and what your life looked like?
That moment when I asked Jesus into my heart, it was an experience. It wasn't just a verbal thing. I felt it. It was like a warm blanket being wrapped around me. And I knew and experienced his love. I got that revelation of what Christ's love was like.
Mhm.
And I had come from a Christian home. My mom, one of the wonderful things she did for us was always making sure we were in church. And I believe that alone put a strong family legacy for our family and our path because we moved all the time. So when you move all the time, her first agenda was she was going to go find us a church so we could hear the word of God. And just like the word says, we've hidden that word, in our hearts that we might not sin against him. So even though my life was not resembling the love of God, he had already been putting those seeds inside of me of his truth and his love. And then at 12, there was a aha moment, where you hear the organ play and the light comes down and it's your time.
Yes.
It was my time to experience God's love. And so it was a changing point in my life. Now, I would love to tell you at that point that when I walked away from camp, went out and had this amazing life. But that wasn't the case. That
Right.
wasn't the case. We so quickly forget the goodness of God, especially if we're not in His Word daily, if we're not seeking His love and looking to Him more than we're looking to our circumstances and our environment. And so, growing up, getting to young adulthood, I made a lot of mistakes, but that's okay because God, He never leaves us or forsakes us, just like it says in Hebrews, and His hand was upon my life, and He knew that seed He sowed, He needed to continue to water and give sunshine to, and He just continued to put the right people in my life to get me to where I am today.
You guys don't know this, but we're actually recording this episode ahead of time. So the day that you hear it is not actually the day that of recording. So today is actually August the 28th. And when I got on a call with Liz this morning to discuss today's episode, we were both reminded of Romans 8:28. I think in a lot of ways it's our initial encounter with God and with Jesus and having that revelation of a savior and a friend happens at a young age, but I can definitely relate to taking a very circuitous route throughout my teens and early 20s and then finding my way back to God through a lot of my own personal struggles. On our call, you had alluded to this refining work that God was doing in you from your childhood all the way up to adulthood and even becoming a mom. For someone who's never walked through that kind of heat, and that heat can really cause you to do one of two things. It can cause you to lean into the presence of God, or it can cause you to withdraw, thinking that maybe you missed it. What did that refining fire season look like for you? And can you help us understand what did it feel like for you when you were in the middle of it?
Well, it's kind of like when you're a kid and your parents tell you to eat your vegetables because they know they are good for you and they're going to give you nutrients your body needs, but you really don't want to do it. And, I think that's our flesh screaming against the spirit. The flesh wants to have its own way. But like you said, when you lean in to what God is telling you to do, when you seek His wisdom, His words, His truth, and you decide to follow His ways, all of a sudden your life starts going much better than you thought it could. And so I try not to say, I'm learning not to be hard headed. How's that? I'll be careful what I speak over my life. But in the past, I have been hard headed and chose my own fleshly ways, versus doing what God has instructed me to do. And so that refining fire, because I had experienced his love and I knew it,
Hmm.
I knew that it was good for me. And I will say sometimes I did do what I was supposed to do, but other times I didn't. And I would see the consequences. I mean, that's just God's put that law into action. Whatever you sow, you're going to reap, right? And
Absolutely.
so I decided to get wise and not repeat my mistakes. And yes, but the refining fire, he gave me a word picture for this a long time ago. And I really love this. I will never forget. I was laying in my bed one night praying, and he showed me the human heart and how
Mm.
the human heart beats. It was alive and it was active. Okay. But I saw just a big red, live pumping red heart, but in it was just gold being poured into it. And that to me was the refining fire that God doesn't want to leave us where we're at. He wants to teach us. He wants to bring us up in him. He wants to mature us in him so that we can be more like Christ and we can do what he's called us to do. And that is ultimately to go out and to love him and to love other people.
It talks about in the Bible that I've tried her as silver and I've refined her as gold. And, the heating up the gold is so that all of the impurities will melt away. And so that goldsmith can see his reflection in the one that he's creating or that he's smelting and purifying. And so I think it's a rigorous process, but if you know that the outcome is to be more like Jesus and to walk in your calling, I think all of us would probably agree that we would do it again to be where we are today. You said at 31, you had a tragedy strike. You were widowed unexpectedly with two small children. I remember where I was when I was 31. I actually had my son when I was 32. And it's a time when your life is just beginning, really. How did you find hope in that season? And, how did you lean into God when it felt like everything was being stripped away from you? Single mom, unexpectedly, and all of those things.
That was definitely one of the toughest times that I had ever walked through. And it was very unexpected. It wasn't an illness. My husband at the time, one day he was there. That morning we were talking, laughing, and the next minute he wasn't. He had an aortic aneurysm.
Mm,
And so when someone goes through something like that type of tragedy, naturally your body goes into shock. And that's where I think I stayed for weeks on, even into months. It took me a good year to be able to process really what had happened, where the puzzle pieces started coming together. But I do remember a couple of weeks after David had died, I was kneeling by my bed praying. That's something we had done together. And I remembered the Lord showing me a fork in the road. And he said, you can either come with me and I will walk you through this. I will be with you, or you can be rebellious. And because I mean, it's easy when you go through a tragedy to give in to anger
yeah.
and sadness and thinking, I'm going to take charge. I can't trust God. And so I had a decision to make. And I knew at that point that I needed to lean into the Lord, that I needed to follow his ways. Um, the hardest thing has been through this tragedy with David versus one that we've recently walked through is not understanding. And I think so many people go, why, God? Why did you allow this to happen? How could you do this? I thought you loved me. I mean, all of those questions that we have. But I believe that you have to walk through that, um, but you've got to find your peace along the way. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to be emotional. Just don't stay there. Don't stay in the anger. Don't stay in the denial. Don't let the bitter root take hold, because then that's exactly what the devil wants to do. But God will come in, and he did miracle after miracle after miracle from people he sent along my pathway to encourage me, to messages he gave me, to financial provision, you name it. He took care of me all along the way. And Isaiah 61 became my favorite chapter in the Bible because he does give beauty for ashes. And when you walk through tragedy, the one thing I know is if you will stay true to the word of God, you may not understand it, but just be still, be patient, wait upon the Lord. He will reveal himself to you in time. And I know after a year after David died, I was in a prayer meeting and I was praying one night, and the Lord said to me, had you not walked through this with me, you would not have the intimacy that you have with me. You would not know me in this way. So that's where the word says, count it all joy. How do you count it all joy in trials and tribulations? Because he's going to give you beauty for ashes. It's not fun to walk through, no, but it's part of your story. It's part of the testimony that God wants to use to help other people.
That's so powerful. I know as you were saying that, I was hearing that verse from Hosea that I will allure her into the wilderness and speak tenderly to her. Not that, I mean, in the context of that, he's speaking about Israel being a wayward bride, but, that it is in those furnaces of affliction and those refining fires where our faith is tested and where we know him more intimately because it's sometimes your next breath, just getting through the next thing, you're having to fully lean on God for that strength. So you said you had two small children at that time. Veering off just a little bit, how are those children today, and how have they gleaned from the things that you've walked through in their lives? And in the midst of that, you're dealing with your own issues, you're grieving, and then you're still having to be a pillar of strength for these kids. What did it look like for, you as a mother to continue to pour into them while you're walking through this deep process?
Well, I can tell you they were the reason I got up every morning. So I knew I had to get up. I knew I had to be their
Mhm.
mom. I had to love on them. I had to take care of them. I had to do that. And so it was a blessing, thank goodness. And I'm very proud of them. I have a son named Austin. He's the oldest, and a daughter named Casey. And they have incredible spouses and beautiful families today. And what I love seeing is they're all serving the Lord. And so they're actively serving in ministry in our churches, they actively serve in their community, and they really have a heart to be kingdom minded world changers to make a difference in this world. And I think that's all by the grace of God because I made a lot of mistakes as their parent. But God is faithful and He's full of grace, and He continued to love on them and help them become the adults that they are today. And I think I followed my mom's footsteps. Despite all my mistakes, I always had them in church.
Right,
So
right, right.
there's a common theme there.
It does, it takes a tribe to raise a family. And even when you have both parents in the equation, you have to get people around your family that are speaking the same things, that saying the same things, believing for the best for your kids, showing them how it's lived out so that your kids see that it's real, that it doesn't become it's not your parents' religion, it is our family faith, it is our legacy. So, but I want to segue over. Tell me about this Ragin' Cajun that came into your life about 15 years ago. And talk
Boy,
to me
God has
about
a
how
sense
God
of
even,
humor.
yeah, talk to me about how God just redeemed even the loss of David and grieving not having a spouse. I want to hear about this guy, Greg.
Well, we met on a job in Louisiana. I was an insurance adjuster, and he was as well. We were all called. There was like over 1,300 people called to work the oil spill in Louisiana. And so we met about 10 months into the project and just clicked. It was just very easy conversation with Greg. I was at a point in my life I was not looking for anybody at all. I was there to work, but you know, God knew what I needed. He really did. And Greg is full of life. He is a big dreamer. He's not afraid to try things. And it's really funny. I have to tell you, on our second date, I told him, I said, you need to know something up front. I said, God will always take first place in my life. And if you have a problem with that, we don't need to go out anymore.
Good for you.
And he just laughed. He says, no, I don't have a problem with that. And so I set the foundation of what our relationship was going to look like. But it definitely has been an adventure. And he has helped me move from being a survivor because I felt like I was in survival mode for so much of my life to really opening up my dreamer and saying, you know what, God is for me and he has a great plan and a purpose for our life. And let's go for it. Let's go see how big, we can go and go big or go home, right? So we just stretched our dreamer and we started praying, and God really gave us a passion to build what we're working on, which I know we're going to get to. It's called the Ponds at
So
Shiloh.
you guys, Greg came with packaged with a family of his own, and then you
Yes.
have your two kiddos. So what does that look like? I mean, and you're talking about moving from surviving to thriving. Um, God just multiplied and added to you. So how does all of this look now in light of a broken season transitioning to a season of abundance.
Yes, he definitely multiplied my family, which I love. Greg came with three beautiful grown children. They're amazing. What is a miracle is everybody gets along great together. And we have the most fun when we get together. It is comical. Um, it is just a room full of fun people. And with them now, of course, because most of them are in their 30s, they have their spouses, and we have 10 beautiful grandchildren. And guess what? I have another one on the way. I'm so excited. So our cup runneth over with family. And so it's funny that you asked that because Greg and I, at the age we're at now, we having all of these grandbabies, and we're going, what do we want our family legacy to look like? What do we want to leave for our grandchildren and for our great grandchildren? And so we started talking about it. And the one thing that Greg and I are both conscious about is really growing our relationship with the Lord. Because one thing we've learned is that without Him, nothing exists. Nothing's impossible with God, and without God, we don't even want to go forward. And so what did that look like? Well, so we went to Austin and Casey a couple of years ago because they live in the same town we do. We all live in Amarillo, Texas right now, although we're making a big move. And we started dreaming together. And there was a question I asked everybody, and I said, if money wasn't a factor, okay, and your job wasn't a factor, what would you want to do with your life? And they all said, the common theme was we wanted to live somewhere, have a piece of land where there were trees and water. We could grow our own food. We could grow a big garden. We could spend more quality family time together, where we could serve our community, and where we could build a prayer chapel. And so that's something we could all agree upon. So a couple of years ago, instead of just talking about it,
Mhm.
Greg said, let's start looking for land. Let's start looking for land in East Texas because that's what they described. And so it took us 2 years and a very patient realtor, praise the Lord for Mac Cheney, who was so patient with us and family dynamics. But we found our property in a little place called Ben Wheeler, Texas. So
Did you dream as a 12-year-old or even as a 31-year-old that you would have all of this now?
no, not at all. Not at all.
So, talk to me about this property. And, I think even just getting your entire family on the same page is a miracle in and of itself. So, Greg the Dreamer it inspires you guys to go in full pursuit of your promised land. What did that process look like? Because I think you guys had a couple of almosts, and you were really having to faith your way through some closed doors.
Yes, yes. And we look back now and thank the Lord for closed doors. So our first property, we were ready to pull the trigger on in a little place called Wills Point, Texas. The gentleman who owned it was incredible working with us. We'd gone to the property several times, which is quite a drive. And we started saying, okay, we could do this and we could do that. And we really were painting the picture. That weekend, we had decided we were going to put the money down and put an offer on the property.
Mhm.
And the day before I was going to make that phone call, the owner called me and said he had gotten a cash offer, and he was so sorry. And so we're like, okay, that's not God's will. That's not where we were supposed to be. And then we found an incredible place that had so much of the structure we already needed to be moving our entire family to a property already on it, and was going to fast forward all the things we felt like we needed to build and do. And Mineola, Texas, gorgeous property. But it was a little bit out of our comfort zone price wise. The lady was willing to work with us. We were trying to negotiate, and it just wasn't coming together. And so when we got the no, it was almost a relief. We knew we're like, okay. And we spent a lot of time and energy on that property, to be honest with you.
Were you frustrated even though you were relieved? I mean, in the real of that.
I think some of our family members were more frustrated than I was. There was a little bit, especially with the first one. But the second one, just because I kept going, Lord, your will be done. Not my will, but your will be done. And so
Mhm.
when he closed the door, I just thought, okay, there's a reason for that. There's a reason that that door was closed. And so, yeah, was there some frustration? Probably so, because I knew I was going to have to start all over again. Mind you, this is a 2-year process. So, were there times did we feel like God was saying, or we were saying to ourselves, are we really supposed to be doing this? Or
Right.
here's what I will say: the enemy of great is good. We have a good life where we are, we have good jobs, we have an incredible church that we're part of here. That's the hardest thing to leave. You
Yeah.
know, we have amazing friends and family members. So leaving all that is scary. It's hard. But when God gives you a vision and it's so much bigger than you can do, and He has a kingdom purpose with it, and it is burned in your heart and your mind and your soul, you've got to leave good to go establish His great. And
It's
so,
very Abraham of you. You know,
uh,
to get out from your father's land and go to the place that I'm going to show you. And you're literally like, well, where is it? You know?
yes, yes.
So I want to segue. I want you to kind of talk about, you're going through this process. Your daughter has got a call on her life. Your son has a call on his life. There are all these different things that honestly the audience or the listeners aren't even really totally aware of, that are cooking in the background of trying to scope out this destination, right? Um, Ponds of Shiloh, you find this place. How did that go? How did the Lord lead you to the ponds? And then what else is happening in your life at that time? So we've got, you said the greatness of God happening here, and still a lot of really hard things that you're processing as a family.
Right, right. Um, Good and bad, lots of good and bad. Moving forward, sometimes we moved backwards. The ponds at Shiloh, our realtor knew about this property, and he kept saying, I want you to come take a look at this property. I want you to, and mind you, it's a 7-hour drive. So Greg and I tried a couple of times to get away. Our work schedules just wouldn't allow for it. We finally were able to sneak off, go take a look at the property, and immediately we thought, he's so right. This is meeting so much of our requirements. I mean, it's a little over 174 acres. It has two beautiful ponds on it, fish. Oh my goodness, my guys are so happy. You should see the fish they've been catching out of those ponds. Big fountain, big beautiful entrance when you come in, through the property. And then it has a 3,000 square foot metal building where about 1,100 of it is living space and the rest is all storage. And so 1,100 square feet for all the families to live in. So we're trying to work out the family dynamics of that. And my daughter and her husband say, well, we're going to build a house. And my son and his wife say, well, we'll build a house. And my mother and her husband are also moving onto the property. And they have purchased what they call a tiny home and put out there. And so we're putting an RV until the houses get built, and we're working, all of the construction. Anybody who's done construction before knows that it is always so much bigger than you ever anticipate.
Mhm.
And so we are working towards moving forward in that, and that is exciting. But what we saw so much is we saw so many places that people could come and enjoy and get alone with God. When you get in the great outdoors, because He is the creator, I don't know, He's always spoke to me outside.
Yes.
And we want that for people. We want them to be able to come onto our property because it's God's property. He's the one who gave us the vision. He's given us the provision. He is making a way where there seems to be no way. I just have to laugh because it's just so much bigger than any of us could have done. So we just get to keep watching His hand upon the property, the people He's bringing into our lives, the resources. It's just blowing my socks off of how He's going about it.
Share some of the things that collectively, as a family, because I do believe that as a family unifies behind the vision that the Lord has for them, God's going to start to give different downloads to different members of the family. What are some of the things that when your entire family was able to go here, what are some of the things that you saw for this place?
Well, first of all, because there are little kids involved too, all the kids have kids. Um, they wanted a place to be able to raise their children where we got back to the basics.
Mhm.
So many times we live in such a fast-paced world, and there's electronics, there's computers, laptops, telephones. Those things have a place. They're a tool. That's great. But to be all consumed with them
Yeah,
is a whole nother story. So our goal was we wanted our kids playing in the dirt. We wanted our kids helping us in the garden. We wanted our kids fishing outside. We wanted our kids to be doing Bible studies on the fishing dock. We
Mhm.
wanted our kids learning to serve others. And that's part of some of our projects that we're working on, where as a family, collectively, we are going to be the hands and feet of Jesus because that's what he's called us to do. Now, I
Absolutely.
could tell you 9 million reasons we could be disqualified for that, but we are his children, so we're going to move forward in all our imperfection and to go love on others. So
So what would be the anchor point of that property that the Lord spoke to you that is to go in first?
definitely the prayer chapel. Even before we had this property, he had spoke that to me, and I shared that with the family, and they were all in agreement. That was something that there was not even a no or let's talk about this or anything. We wanted to dedicate this to the Lord. We want him to have his way. This is his property. He's the one who's made the way for us, and he can use it, for his glory. That's what we want. So,
Absolutely. It's a place where people can encounter God, but it's also serving as a living memorial. So talk to me about, has the Lord given you a vision of the things that are going to happen in that chapel, and what is really the, I would say, kind of the genesis of the name that you've chosen and who it's for and what God has shown you guys that he wants to do there.
yes. So, the one thing that the Lord showed me about this prayer chapel was people would come and they would write out their prayer request. And that way, we as a family could pray over them while they're there if they wanted. When they left their request, we could pray over it, or they could just spend time alone in there and connect with God. And so I know it's anointed. I know it's appointed. I know that this is God's plan. And I think, especially in the day and age we live in, we need a place where we can go and shut the rest of the world out, the busyness, the noise, and get alone with God and hear his voice and get direction. Because when we do that, that is the living word that he gives us that we can go out, take, and apply those marching orders to change our lives,
Yeah.
right? So many times we just need that answer. And I know that within this prayer chapel, people are going to find an answer.
Yes.
Um, what I didn't know, because we purchased this property in March of 2025, is that 2 months later,
Mhm.
our family and our story would be the first testimony. So I'm going to leave a lot of that story for my daughter to tell at her time. But
Mhm.
we had a grandson, and his name was Noah, which means rest. And the ponds of Shiloh that we named the property means Shiloh means peace. So this is a place of rest. This is a place of peace. But our sweet little grandson only lived to be a month old. And despite incredible doctors and people praying all over the world, God said his assignment was completed and chose to take him home. And so when we pray for people, who have lost a child or who have lost a husband or a spouse or lost a loved one, we can understand what they're going through. We know that pain, but
Mhm.
we also know the redemptive story that
Amen.
God is the healer and he will see them through and walk them through it. So,
I love his name and just that, the vision that I get of this chapel that you've described is that it is an ark. The Lord can shut them up in this place and speak to them there. and minister to them. And, it's living proof that the hardships that you have walked through as a family are just, when I hear you talk, I don't hear you talk about all the loss. I hear you talk about the new births. I hear you talk about the abundance, the provision, the vision. Those things are, when you describe the fork in the road, that's always the two choices that we have, that families can come here. I want you to tell listeners about the other big endeavor.
Several months ago, we discovered a lady out of McKinney, Texas, Megan Neubauer. Her and her dad had a U picket farm, or they still do. And
Yeah.
she has created this incredible business model of you can go in and reserve your picking time online, and you go through and you pick your own vegetables. So not only are you getting healthy vegetables, but you're also getting to have an experience, you
Mhm.
know? And
Yeah.
so many people don't have time to grow a big garden these days that this is kind of a great segue of getting to enjoy both, picking the vegetables and then also having them to enjoy for food. And so we took that business model and I bought her book. I followed her YouTubes. I mean, she is really incredible, her and her dad, what they've done. And we're going to replicate part of that at the Ponds of Shiloh, but we're also going to call it a pick and pray because we want people to really connect to all of the scriptures about sowing seed in the Bible.
Yeah.
And so when they come onto the property, I'll just tell you what we envision is that our family members, like I said, our grandchildren are going to be serving. And so they're going to be there to welcome people as they come through. They pass through the ponds. We have a designated parking area. They get out of the parking area. They walk over a beautiful wooden bridge, which is a great photo op. There's trees, the ponds. It's just gorgeous right there. And then they walk through an archway of honeysuckle into the garden area where we're there to help them. And we'll give them a basket where they can go pick all their organic, back to Eden garden vegetables and berries. And we're going to have a prayer card for them to fill out if they want to leave that prayer card, or if they want to take it to the prayer chapel and leave it and spend some time alone there, they can. But as they go through the garden and they're picking their tomatoes and berries and squash and cucumbers and zucchini and onions and all of the great things that we're going to have there for them
Yeah.
to pick, they're going to have scriptures posted throughout the garden for them to meditate upon. We're going to have some fun recipe cards. What do you do with all these vegetables? And just some nutrition value that you can read. So the garden, going through the garden in itself is going to be a great experience. And then so for fun, because we're all about having fun with the kiddos,
Yes.
we're going to have a bunch of pygmy goats. And I don't know if y'all have ever played with pygmy goats before, but they are hilarious. And they're so much fun to play with. So we're going to have some pygmy goats. And then I have the most amazing horses too for people to enjoy and pet. So we want it to be a neat experience where not only do they enjoy it, sit out under the pavilion, have a glass of lemonade, and enjoy their time there at the Ponds of Shiloh, but also encounter God and that they walk away going, wow, I got to go tell my friend about that.
That is just such a grand vision. I mean, and to have the whole collective family contributing and then sewing into the community at Ben Wheeler and even beyond that. I think I mean, I know for me, as a mother of a almost teenager now, we source from farmers markets because it's
Mhm.
just you can trust local and you know where the food's coming from and it's not the GMO stuff that's, happening out there, but to turn it into an experience and then to introduce people to the Lord or to be able to pray for the community. I know Ben Wheeler and Tyler in particular, a very strong faith community. Have y'all had anyone kind of that has come around you on a local level to kind of just confirm some of the things that the Lord's put in your hearts for this community?
I am blown away by the people there. When we share our vision, they are all, oh, we can't wait. What can we do to help? Everybody from the people who laid the septic to the electric to our new trash men have all invited us to church. We've been, going to, it's been the most amazing community. And so, yes, yes, definitely there's a lot of confirmation. I already feel accepted and loved there. And that's hard to do when you move into a new
Well,
place.
that's about anywhere and nowadays, I feel like. But for people who don't know where Ben Wheeler is, it's close to Canton, correct?
Just south of Canton.
Okay.
Yes. Uh-huh.
And and Canton is pretty well known for they have their trade days out there, and it has a draw from all over the state and even from other states. So you guys are not going to be far from that place.
No, we are not. So Trades Day, I'm sure we'll have some people who want to enjoy that and then come on down about 13 miles south of them and come enjoy the U picket or the pick and pray.
It's just, I cannot wait to see what God does with this property. It is so, just the gold that has come out of from these years of preparation, really. I mean, you could call it many things, but really just preparation. And even with baby Noah getting to be a part of that legacy, is just so incredible. So, you said at one point that you were always saying, I want less of me and more of you, Lord. How do you see that playing out at the ponds? And how do you see your prayer being answered?
I would say to that, it's going to take less of me and more of him for this to be
It
successful.
always does. Goodness.
Yes, that's where the direction I want anyway. I've learned that's the one thing I've learned is I want more of him and less of me, and that refining fire. I know, and sometimes I have to remind myself, so I'm easy to forget, and that's where I do fall into frustration when things don't immediately just happen,
Yeah.
or I'm having to sit and wait. He's developing more of that patience word in
Y'all
me.
don't know this
Oh,
about Liz, but she's not a sit and waiter. But first,
I'm a doer.
she's
I'm a
high
Martha.
execution all the way.
Yes. And he's going, be still, be still and know
Sit
that I
down.
am God. That's right. Quit trying to control this. Oh, it is definitely a journey, but hopefully I can encourage other people who are also Marthas.
There's this, I keep going back to Promised Land. And when the baton or whatever you call it was passed from Moses to Joshua, and Joshua's rallying people, just like you've rallied your family, the Lord spoke to Joshua and he said, little by little, I'll drive them out before you. And the reason why he did that was because he didn't want the land to become desolate. When the Israelites or the Jews went into their promised land, he wanted them to walk into abundance with every place that they overtook. And so sometimes it's like when we, being high execution, want to, go for the gusto and drive in and take dominion, that it's like the
Yes.
Lord's like, I just want you to do this little by little because I have more for you at each checkpoint as you're moving into promise. So that's just something that I wanted to share because I do think it's very hard for people like us to rest, which I think in some ways it's also a little bit of a joke from the Lord. It's like you're going to name your chapel Rest, and I sent you a boy as a missionary to tell you to rest, and this has been given to you. And I'm going to provide, and I want you to rest. Rest is
Yes.
knowing that it's my endeavor, it's my vision, and I will accomplish it through you. And I think, there's people like us that we sit on, on these episodes and we think, okay, well, hope requires, I've got hope on this. So I need to partner with the Lord. I need to do everything I can, and it's that cease striving,
Yes.
and let him drive. So, I just was little 12-year-old Liz a high executor as well.
Not as much as I am today. No, I don't. To some degree, I should say I was in the things that I was given responsibility. I was very responsible for my younger brother and sister. I was very responsible for what my mom and dad had asked me to do, and they could trust me in that. And so I think to some degree, yes. When my problem as a child is I didn't play enough. I
Mm.
was too serious. I had to become an adult way too early in life. I had to take on more responsibility than most 12-year-olds ever have on their plate. And so um, the word rest and playfulness is something God I know is restoring back into my life. And this is so funny. I hadn't thought about this before, Jessica. You're making me think. But it is definitely something that I think that's why he's given me so many wonderful grandchildren, is because they teach me to play and I am learning to play with them. And God's innocence and his love and his desire for us to enjoy this amazing creation that he's given us.
What would you tell 12-year-old Liz about her life today? Like, what would be your, I almost want to call it like mission statement? Because she had this encounter. She saw this family at a camp in the mountains, and here you are today. Like, that was deposited into you as a child. And now
Mhm.
you're taking on an endeavor with your family at a place where people are also going to come have their encounter. What would you go back and tell her today about the impact of that moment in meeting Jesus?
I think I would tell her to have hope. Galatians 6:9, do not grow weary in well doing because you're going to reap a harvest if you do not give up. And just that encouragement, definitely, to not give up, to it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay.
Better than okay.
It's going to be great.
You're living your dreams. This is incredible. You know,
Yes,
even
yes.
through it all, just that God would, I mean, you said it yourself, prophesying over yourself. He gives beauty for ashes. And it's amazing that the two can coexist at the same time, you know?
Mm-mm.
But he's always looking to give us this beautiful exchange if we will just have the grit and believe God for greater rather than
Yes.
good, right? So someone who's listening right now, they might be in a refining season, maybe even a stripping season where they feel like life is unfair. Maybe they're angry at God. Maybe they're questioning God. Is this, what you spoke to me isn't lining up with what I'm seeing? Maybe they don't think that God can take their pain and actually give them the beauty for ashes part. What would what would you say to that person? Maybe the 31-year-old Liz, what would you say to her who might be listening right now?
Yeah. Um, choose the path with God, even when you're angry with him, even when you don't understand, even especially when it's hard. Um, Stay with God. Don't give up on him. Don't walk away from him.
Hmm.
I I I go back to that word, be still and know that he is God. And I say that, and I do not say it lightly, because I know that's been hard for me to do. I am the person who's going to drill down. I want answers, and I don't understand this. I need revelation, God. I need to understand what's happening right now. What can I do? And he's going, I don't need you to do anything. I need you to just be still and know that I am God and I have not left you and I have not forsaken you and that I do have a good plan and a purpose for your life. And I have so much more than you can see right now. So you almost have to just rest in where you're at and continue to press into Him, even when you don't feel like it. Don't be led by your emotions. Hide God's word in your heart so that when you are going through those tough times, you can get through them because He'll bring that to memory. He'll bring it back, and you're like, oh, yeah, I know. I know this is just a season. I know I'm going to get through it. I know that there's going to be beauty on the other side, God, that you're going to give me understanding, revelation, and see me through.
Amen. Amen. I just want to thank you for choosing to hang on to hope in spite of the hard times because and to build something. Well, maybe the pieces of your life haven't been necessarily pretty, because it's it's like through our brokenness and through our submission and through our choosing to believe that, God, if it's not good, then you're not done, that we can, pick ourselves back up each day and continue to run in full pursuit of the things that He's shown us. So, I'm just, it's such a ministry to just say that even in spite of our scars, God can actually take that and make it a sanctuary. It is like a memorial stone that in the midst of something that's just seems so hard and seems like loss can still point to the goodness of God, that He doesn't allow one thing to leave without something new being born of it. And I just personally believe that for all that you have sown into your family and sown into the people that have been in your church, in your sphere, in your leadership circles, in this now community in Ben Wheeler, Texas, that God is just going to do exceedingly above all you can ask or think or imagine. So thank you for letting us hear some of this and for inspiring us that our challenges don't break us, they define us, and that there's still yet more to be pursued. So I just want to say that I am a big believer that every encounter with a person is a divine appointment. And the ponds of peace or the ponds of Shiloh is there's just this vision that is really truly from the heart of God to a community. And not that just it's for the community, but that the things that your family has just walked through, there's so much that you have not shared, but the things that you guys have walked through is this place is like a portion for you for your own peace for that. So I just am so grateful that you guys have all given God your yes, and that you've said yes to the vision, that you are becoming the hands and feet of provision for a community. And I really believe that God's going to do more with it than you can even maybe possibly realize in this moment. But um, I want to turn to you guys, the audience, and say that Liz, specifically stated, right, that the Lord told her to build the chapel first. I think that when we have a God-sized vision, it really requires people, a community of believers, to see it through. So I know that you're working on these two projects, and then you're all trying to facilitate a mass migration from West Texas to East Texas, sell properties, look for jobs, basically uproot and replant yourselves while you're preparing this garden of sorts for the local community and maybe even North Texas at large. How big did you say that garden is going to be?
We're going to do a 5 acre back to Eden garden. Hmm.
Okay, so 5 acres. So I would love for you to share with us some of the things that you're believing God for, just for the pick and pray garden, for the back to Eden garden, and then also things that you have been praying for God to source to you for the chapel so that you can make it and build according to God's vision for that place.
Hmm. So right now, being in as we wrap up August, what we're our next step with the garden is going to be is we are actually with a back to Eden garden. Your work is done primarily in the first year of getting this garden established because it's totally different than traditional garden where you just till the ground. So the whole point of a back to Eden garden, it comes from the premises of if you go walk in a forest and underneath the forest floor, if you move the leaves and the pine needles and everything, and you dig in the dirt, you're going to find some rich, fertile soil that's damp and has life in it. And so that's where the back to Eden came from is God will supply everything your ground needs if you give it that the right kind of environment. So with the back to Eden garden, the first thing you do is you lay out either cardboard or 4 or 5 sheets of newspaper to kill all the weeds underneath.
Mhm.
And then you take and you put some really rich, fertile compost on there. And then you top it off with some wood chips for the top mulch to protect the plant. And
Mhm.
so this actually gets an irrigation, even though we're not ready to plant now, it gets the soil prepared. So when it comes springtime and we start planting, that soil is fertile and it is has a life of its own, which is really exciting. And so we are preparing the ground right now for that. So we need plenty of cardboard and newspaper and compost. and also some wood mulch. And so we are looking for the right sources to get that from and
Wonderful.
prepare that. Yes.
And about the chapel, what are some of the things that God's laid on your heart for the chapel itself?
So the chapel, it's going to be simple. It's not going to be huge or anything like that, but it's going, I know that it's supposed to have some beautiful stained glass windows in there. So I have been looking for churches who have, rebuilt, taken the stained glass windows out. I have not found the right ones yet. And so I'm looking for the right stained glass windows, as well as some pews that we could put in there. I'd love a kneeling bench and then also a steeple. Again, nothing fancy. This is a very simple type of chapel, but we are looking for those resources. So if your listeners know of a place that we could acquire those from, that would be a huge blessing.
Well, Liz, I buy into your vision. And now that I know what you're looking for, I know how to help get the right resources to you. So I just want to thank you so much. Number one, an endeavor like this is not something that a lot of people would give their yes to. I know people all the time that would love to retreat off into a property and be there and kind of, close their curtains and put a fence up and stay gated and not let people in. But what you're doing is, ministering to people and serving them food and praying over them. And I just, y'all don't know this, but back in 2021, Liz and I did a book together. Liz actually led it. It's called Change Your World by John Maxwell. And we were doing an online study of this book. The first chapter starts out with, we can't wait for change. We have to be the change that we wish to see in this world. And that's really why I started the Hope Pandemic. And so coming back to you, Liz, and knowing that God connected us there, and that since then, I mean, that the Lord has just downloaded this revelation and this legacy vision for your family, and that you guys are running in full pursuit of that. So I cannot wait to see what God is going to do through this property. And I just want to thank you for sowing into me with that book and inviting me to that study. There's so much more that God has in store for Ben Wheeler that Ben Wheeler is not even aware of. And same for your family. So thank you for being here. If anyone wanted to get in touch with you or follow the journey as you guys are, I mean, I'm still balking at 1,100 square feet with like 12 people in it. So, I mean, that's worth watching right there. But aside from that, as this property is developed and cultivated and comes to life, where can people find you so that they can watch this whole thing, watch the hands of God working?
Absolutely. We would love people to, jump in the story and get their feedback. We want to hear from people. So we have a Facebook page called the Ponds at Shiloh. So feel free to reach us there, or you are welcome to reach out to me at my email. And that email is lizroundtree@att.net.
Great. Well, I'm hoping that the next time I have you on, we can do it on your property.
Yes, yes.
I've got to get out there and see it. But thank you so much for being a guest. Thank you for giving us a glimpse into this big vision that God has just gifted your family. And I'm praying that anyone who's listening that has a resource they could get in touch with you and help sow into this bigger vision for life in a completely different way. After going through childhood divorce and losing your husband at such a young age, the failed relationships, and then most recently the loss of Noah, she could have looked at all this and said, God, where are you? Why did these things keep happening in my life? But instead she took that same story and she said, God, what are you doing? She chose a hope mindset. And that's the thing, is we get a choice. We get to choose hope. And we can have this desire to understand God's greater picture, even in the midst of just such great pain. On top of all that, she didn't wait until pain made sense to keep moving forward. She didn't have all the answers. She took these broken pieces, and then she just allowed God to take them and use them effectively. So if you're listening this today and you're in your own refining fire, maybe you're where Liz was at 31. Maybe you're wondering how you're going to make it through tomorrow. Or maybe you're in a season where your dreams that God, you feel like God gave you, just feel impossible. I want you to hear this. God is not finished writing your story. In fact, He's got a love letter for you, and then He's got a love letter for the world through your story. Liz is an example of that. That 12-year-old little girl at church camp who first felt God's overwhelming love, she's still on the inside of Liz, and now she's building her own sanctuaries. So whatever you first believed about God, that He loved you unconditionally, we come to God oftentimes as children, and He tells us to have this childlike faith. I just want to remind you today that that part of you isn't dead. It's waiting for you to remember the same God who captured your heart, and He's still holding you even now through your circumstances. Maybe, just maybe, your pain is preparing you to build something beautiful for someone else. So, we talked about it at the end of the episode, but I want to remind you again, if you felt a connection to Liz's story, or maybe you just really resonated with this whole Ponds of Shiloh endeavor and you want to contribute to that, I want to invite you to write yourself into their story as a family legacy. I'm going to drop Liz's contact information in the show notes, and I would invite you guys to follow them on Facebook just to kind of chart this journey together. And who knows, maybe one day you'll end up going out there and doing the pick and pray garden, or praying at the sanctuary, at the little chapel there. Remember that when we give to God's vision, we're not just funding a project, but we're becoming part of that harvest. So I just hope that today's message and Liz's story blessed you. We'll be back next week with another story from another great woman of faith who is using her pain to impact thousands of people. So I can't wait to see you then. And if you feel like this would resonate with someone and you want to share this message with someone, maybe someone who's going through a dark time, or maybe they've passed through their dark time, but they're still trying to make sense of the pain, I'd love for you to share this with them, and let's just try to spark that hope flame in someone else today. So thank you, and I'll see you next week.